stage is disconcerting. It's good to sometimes see people. In this case, I have no idea who's in or who's out, or whether I'm going to be talking to myself or not. But yes, keeping fingers crossed. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the session. I want to take a moment today, and Angela briefed me and said, this is a lightning talk, and I mentioned to Mr. Wade a bit earlier on, is that today you are not going to hear anything technical about Kubernetes, right? When we get technical in the world of Kubernetes, we need more than 30 minutes to actually have a meaningful conversation usually. But I wanted to give us a talk about why Kubernetes is not enough. And maybe it was almost like our quick chat earlier on preempted this. Again, this is what we're noticing from a lot of our customers, right? Some customers have been immensely successful with Kubernetes, and when I say immensely successful, it is building projects, building systems and environments on top of Kubernetes that absolutely drive their business, right? And in this case, I am not, from a Red Hat perspective, how do we measure success? Well, the only metrics that we have really is the size and scale of a deployment. And to say that, we have customers that run workloads on our Kubernetes platform across thousands of worker nodes is not an exaggeration, right? We do actually have customers that have built these types of environments and continue to benefit from that. On top of that, but this is not about scale and how big and comparing things today. This is how we see the evolution, and we see the customers that have been really successful is embracing this technology, okay, and then building it out and creating an application platform for their consumers. And in this case, their consumers, I would be talking to platform engineers who have built these things, and their consumers as the rest of the business, the developers, the other lines of business, maybe the guys who bring their own applications and come and run it on the platform, right? And quite frankly, for these things to be successful, Kubernetes is just not enough. We need to think beyond what Kubernetes is. It's a great foundation, but if the requirement is only Kubernetes and you only want to do work in that world, you could get away with the 4 primitives: deployment, service, replica set. What's the other one? I keep forgetting it. What's important? Pod in Kubernetes, and you'd be done, right? And how's this happened, right? Things have changed over the years. We've seen this evolution. Right? Sadly, Unix is dead. Linux is won out. I see a great irony in it. I remember being a very young and naive software engineer, systems engineer, and standing in a big bank and telling them, yes, but you can run this on Linux, and being chased out because they told me the bank will never ever run Linux, right? Guess I was right. It's the only thing. We've seen applications and software evolving from big monolith applications, and they haven't gone away, right? Your ERPs and core banking systems and logistics management systems and HR systems, they will probably remain monoliths for still a long time to come. But a lot of other applications, especially where organizations have built their own applications, we've seen the trend towards those becoming more modular, right? And that's gone hand in hand with this. Okay, we used to have these things called web services, and then we renamed them to microservices, but we didn't really know why we changed that. And then we started understanding, okay, this is what we need to do. So now microservices weren't enough, and now we're in the world of talking about cloud native applications. And even until today, I still need to correct a lot of people, because when we speak of cloud native, we do not speak of things that you run in Amazon or Azure or Google, right? We speak of a way of building an application and delivering it as if it's going to go into any cloud at the end of the day. And then those who were in the plenary, we now see the advent of AI. I'm being very polite with this last line, because actually this is the death of BPM tools. They are being replaced by AI, or as I like to call it, intelligent automation on this, right? So things are changing, and they continue to change. But at the same time, certain things don't change, right? The way we build good software don't change. I recently revisited this book. It's been, in my career as a software developer, it's been something that I've gone back to many, many times when trying to solve problems, right? It is almost 20 years old, this book, maybe a bit less, 15 years old, when Martin Fowler published it. For those of you who are not familiar with Martin Fowler, he's the founder of a consultancy, but he is a prolific writer, and I'd recommend anybody just Google him, go and read his work. He's got some profound insights about how you build software and how do you build good software. Okay, but going back to this book, the knowledge that is contained and the way that we do things and things work, right? This hasn't changed, and for the old hands that may have been in the world of Unix and transition to the world of Linux, you'll know that there are certain stalwarts, the teachings of Eric Raymond and the teachings of Richard Stallman and these guys. There's a way to build good software. Do one thing, do it well, and don't try and be everything to everybody. There's still good value in this, right? So those things don't change. And it also means that satisfying certain needs of a development team don't change, irrespective of what they're building. A couple of years ago, everybody was building in Java. Go and new wave languages were just emerging. Now everybody's moved to different languages, right? There's a divide between front end and back end. You're either building in React or you're building a back end in Go or Spring Boot or whatever the case might be. Okay, but the fundamentals that you use haven't changed. The way you deliver your software hasn't changed, right? And some of the basic tenets of these things still remain, okay, as developers. And I'll explain why I'm talking about developers potentially to folks who are infrastructure focused, because I think most of you are providing some sort of a platform or building tools or creating systems that your internal customers, i.e. your developers, all lines of business with their custom applications or vendor applications are consuming, right? But certain rules don't really change. If you are in the world of development, okay, you are always trying to achieve these things. You're always trying to deliver your software early. You never actually manage to do that. Software is always changing, right? If you've been a developer working with a line of business that has to build software, right? It's always changing. As soon as you build something, you show something, people realize that they actually want something else. Okay, they always want you to be shipping these things, so your software always needs to be available, right? Or you always need to get a feature out on there, right? And this is tantamount to developers, right? So developers, we give them a bad rap, okay? And I'm allowed to make fun of developers because I've been one. I've also been a systems engineer, and a network engineer. So I've been in both worlds. I get to make fun of developers because they are a fickle bunch, and a special bunch quite often, okay? But any developer knows that your software means nothing if it's not running in production. If it hasn't shipped, it doesn't exist. right? And this is one of the key things that developers want from the systems and the environments that they consume. Okay, we'd like to think that we as operations are working side by side with the developers, and in some organizations, some folks do. The reality is this DevOps kumbaya moment hasn't really happened as well as we thought it would, right? What is the reality is that business and development teams are always working together, right? And the developer is the face of what the business wants at the end of the day, okay? We thought that teaming up people and motivating and trusting them is a way to work. Again, the jury is out on whether the whole campfire, get dev and ops to speak together works or not. Okay, I think there was a time when we valued face-to-face communication. Pre-COVID, we had this idea of the stand-up and all of those types of things. Whether it's still valid or not, who knows at the end of the day. And there's a lot of other agile qualities that we use to build software. Okay, but if we take some of that out, there's only a key set of things that we really need to be able to cater for. These things, they do not change. Okay, is that software will always change. Software always needs to be delivered. People always want quality by default. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, we don't want to concertina the pace. We don't want to have periods where we go slow and have periods where we go fast, right? That saying, I think it's in sniper law. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? It's about consistency, right? Consistently being able to actually do things. Okay. And obviously, we need to make sure that what we deliver, and developers want to make sure that what way they deliver actually works around it. Okay. And then the last one here, I like this, okay, because developers are lazy. I almost used a bad word. Okay. The keep it simple approach to dividing or providing systems and environments for developers, okay, is to make sure that you maximize the work not done. If a developer is not going to do something, okay, or they don't have to do something, they won't, right? So either it is mandatory for them to do something as part of a process, or you take it away and not take care of this. Okay. Now, why is this important? Okay. These are some of the agile principles, but in building out Kubernetes platforms, okay, if you want consumption, if you want people to come to your platform, if you want the platform to be a success, well, your Kubernetes, you have to be building a platform. Okay? If it is not something that a developer can consume easily without friction and maximize that work not done, then you have another technical environment. You don't necessarily have a platform on that. Right? So what are the key capabilities that we need in a platform? What brings developers? If we go back a couple of years, right, when the whole cloud thing just started, one of the most successful platforms as a service, the PaaS environments, was an environment called Heroku. Right? Heroku was an online offering where you literally just brought your code, and in minutes, your code could go from code on the laptop to a deployed internet-facing application. That was the true first platform as a service. Okay? And that is still the way that we need to be thinking. Okay? If we want to build environments, and especially Kubernetes-based environments, because developers want Kubernetes, developers are sold on the idea of containers. Okay, we need to evolve those environments into these application platforms, right? And at a minimum, the platform must cater for these things with as little friction as possible. Right? It needs to provide the runtime the developers use. What do I mean about that? If your guys are building Java, you need to provide images that are trusted and have been configured specific to your environment and the development requirements, so that they can actually consume those images. You do not want developers to be building their own container files or container images. It's a bad idea. You do not want developers to be hand rolling container images on their laptops, right? I often say to folks when we have this conversation is that in 30 odd years, we spent an enormous amount of money as the IT industry securing the perimeter of the enterprise. Firewalls, web application firewalls, intelligent routing, content delivery systems, all of these types of things to keep the bad stuff out. Right? The minute we allow developers to just consume any container from any obscure registry, it's like opening up the back door. And it's just saying, off we go, everybody in. If we do not control that level, all of the money, all of the investment we've made in securing our perimeter is gone, because they've let the Trojans in the Trojan horse into our environment. Right? So you need to take control of the runtimes, right? And provide those. You don't have to dictate, but you work with the teams, right? Whether that's Go language compilers and builders so that you can get containers, whether it's having a very set base container image where we know where the SSL libraries come from, where we know where the compression libraries come from, whether it's a stack of Ruby, Python, PHP, whatever the case might be. Take control of that runtime and make sure you can provide that runtime. And this leads into the second thing, is that you need to provide developers with the most frictionless way to build their code so that it can get to production, right? Most successful application platforms, this is what made something like Heroku so successful in the very early days. The developer's work was done when the code was committed to Git. And once the code was in Git, everything else was taken care of, right? So it starts with the build. You need to be able to build frictionlessly on the platform. If you want developers to embrace and consume the platform, these are some of the capabilities that you need to do. Now, the argument gets made is that, yeah, but we've got GitLab and we've got GitHub Actions, or we've got Azure pipelines and all of those things. Yes, you do. And you've probably invested a lot of money. It's also you delegating responsibility and control of what is in that pipeline off to a third party. If you are comfortable with that, then you keep doing that. Then plug yourself into the end of that pipeline so that you can consume what is built out of that pipeline. If you are not so comfortable with shipping code off to a third party outside of the organization, and then having to bring it back into the organization, think about how you can provide the same or even less frictionless experience to a developer in order to compile and build code in the environment. And the same thing goes for deployments, right? So it's not just enough to create the artifact. It's like a good application platform also has to take care of the deployment. Now, most of the time, deployment is actually the easy bit. Once you have a container, landing it on Kubernetes is actually, it's the easiest bit. That's what Kubernetes was engineered for from day one, is to do these things en masse. To do this rapidly and at scale, that may take a bit more work. But as long as you take that concern away from the developer, right? As long as the developer still just lives in the world, my code is committed to Git, and I will see it running in whatever environment in a couple of minutes' time. This is how you win those guys over. And then lastly, the ability to observe what is happening. Okay, this is often very difficult, but it is actually quite solvable, right? If you cannot provide adequate metrics, adequate log information, or tracing across services back to the developers, so that when things go wrong in the applications, if you cannot do that, then you don't have an app platform, you just have a technical environment, right? So these are the 4 core principles that needs to be in mind. Now, this is where we start talking about, how do I build this? Because we're still talking about Kubernetes, right? And A lot of folks have done this, and I've done this myself to understand what's involved, right? A lot of folks take just vanilla Kubernetes and they say, we're going to put all of this together. And I liken this to the old days of coach building, right? So before there was Ford or anything of that, if you wanted to have, a custom vehicle, or if you wanted to have a comfortable vehicle, you bought a chassis and an engine from Rolls-Royce, okay? And then you went to a coach builder, and that coach builder built you a one-of-a-kind cab for your vehicle, right? That took long, it was slow, it was error-prone, right? The production line and the assembly line modernized or changed all of that, right? Now vehicles were accessible to everybody. And for 90% of the people out there, they didn't care, right? The famous Henry Ford statement of any color you want as long as it's black. It is actually still so true. It's just like, if you're talking about a technical platform, where's the value in the time spent? Is the value in meticulously engineering every little aspect and putting together different components and then spending weeks on end managing manifests and correlating different version numbers so that you maintain compatibility? Or is the value in actually putting a product and a capability in the hands of the developers? That's the question you need to ask. That's the differentiation between, do we build Kubernetes ourselves, or do we go and get a platform from somebody, right? Because where's my time spent the most productively? Is it patching a system, maintaining the underlying infrastructure, or is it actually providing value add to my consumers, which are in this case developers? Okay. And once we get that right, we obviously accelerate at one phenomenal pace in terms of this, right? So this is what we see from what Red Hat has been engineering over now more than a decade's worth of OpenShift engineering. Yes, we started off as a Kubernetes platform, but we've evolved this platform into something or into a complete application platform. So it's not just about providing Kubernetes. If you only need to do Kubernetes, I can tell you now, and I'd get shot by the sales team, OpenShift is not your platform. If you just want to do basic Kubernetes, OpenShift is not the product you need. Go and build Kubernetes yourself, if that is what makes. If you need to provide an environment that goes quick, right, that allows you to rapidly manufacture software, deploy software, get systems up and running, right, then OpenShift and the way it's assembled and tightly integrated is a platform that may make sense for you. Right? Okay. And this is the conversation we should be having with developers, is to say, how can the dev teams adopt an agile practice? Because I can guarantee you now, if you go to any of the development teams and you ask them, are you completely agile? And they'll tell you no. Because they still work in a disjointed space. I've got code living in one place, maybe GitHub, maybe Azure DevOps, whatever the case might be. I might have pipelines living in another place, legacy Jenkins, or the integrated GitLab build that they're using, whatever. Okay. Can that all bring it together in terms of test-driven development and do that at scale? I can guarantee you the answer is going to be no. Right? Okay. If we build application platforms that can be consumed by teams, we can get them closer. We won't solve all of these, but we can get them closer. Okay. And this leads us to the idea of how the platform supports the software factory. Okay. A good platform will make a software factory based on test-driven design at scale a reality. Okay. And it's built on three pillars. The first one is to enable. You enable developers by providing configured test tooling to developers as part of the default development stack. So it's just like, okay, let's everybody agree. And if you come to the platform, this is the test harness that you can make use of, right? And it's configured and it runs. Okay. we can integrate that into the pipeline so we can accelerate your work. So especially with new projects. For existing projects, you're not going to add a lot of value. For developers are bringing new projects to your platform, okay, by having this available and ready to go so that they can just commit code and get into a pipeline and test tooling, this accelerates their work. And then all things do come with a bit of enforcement, right? We have to continue to enforce this. And this is where we all decide to be the grown-ups in the group, is because we take control of the pipeline, we can align this to what the organizational norms would be. You know, library, making sure that nobody's using expired libraries or vulnerable libraries. Okay, plugging that into the pipeline to make sure that we are testing, checking for test coverage, checking for vulnerabilities in that. If you take control of that, you actually start enforcing a bit of the rules. And believe me, developers aren't so hard-headed when it comes to enforcement. If you can do this without creating too much friction, people will continue to consume your platform. Okay, so it's do the right thing, make it easy, and do it by default on those. Okay. And this is where I do a bit of product punting, okay? Because as I said before, what we've built with OpenShift is not the entire answer. We're not saying like, okay, you want to do all of this, do OpenShift. OpenShift provides a basis for you to build these on. But as you'll see here, some of my favorite third-party tools, right, that we do not ship as Red Hat. But it's batteries included, but you can change them where you need to, right? And that might start, you might want to integrate Jira, maybe GitLab, JUnit, you want to do some code quality, SonarQube, some vulnerability scanning, we can take care of that for you, user acceptance testing. The idea here is this is what a good pipeline looks like. If you can provide this out of the box based on your organizational tools, and address the 80% case, because 80% of the time, this is all the developers need in terms of their pipeline. Build the code, check the code, test the code, get it into a running platform on top of that. Okay. And this is tangible. This is measurable. This we've measured with customers in region, right? This is how it changes. This. When developers have a platform to come to be able to build their stuff, right, we see less toil in them. Productive time in a day goes up commensurate. Now, these are indicative numbers from one customer. Not everybody's going to get that, right? They are first adopters and best adopters in terms of this. Okay, deployment frequency. This is the biggest thing. It's like deployments don't need to be a horror movie on a Friday night. Okay, deployments should just actually happen as a natural course, where some folks went from being able to do 5 deployments a week to being able to deploy 5 times a day, right? Really, really fast moving code. Okay, this is the biggest thing for me. If we do this right, we reduce toil in operations. Okay, we've seen a lot of organizations where building out a platform strategy has allowed them to scale their ratios, where they might have had for every 10 developers, 1 operator. They can go now where 1 operator is able to support 100 developers in that environment, and still maintain the SLAs to the organization. So these are the real measurable impacts. We can measure those as metrics. Okay, and I'm going to end it off here, guys. This is the end of the talk. Like I said, nothing technical. This is all about how do we go from Kubernetes to actually having app platforms. If you are responsible for a technical environment and you are trying to understand, how do we get more usage out of this environment or whatever, there are lots of methodologies that we sort of put in Red Hat that we can share. They actually all open source, like everything that we do. But these are the things that we've now seen over at least 5 years in this space, working with customers, and where we've measured, who have been successful on this modernization and cloud native journey, and who are still struggling. And these things have started to stand out as, wow, okay, this is what differentiates the guys who have had more success than some of the ones who might have had less success. And with that, for anybody still listening, I thank you very much for your time. I think at this point, I am going to direct you back to the lobby. So if you look in the middle of your screen, if you click on the event map, then you can move back to Smarter Tech 2026, and you can move on to the next section. That's fine. I will be around in the lobby if you want to join a chat or connect or anything more. Please feel free to join there, and we can have a conversation around that. Thank you very much, everybody.